What is up, humans of the cardboard? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today I've got another cool discussion video for you. Today we're talking about Generaider. This is actually one of my low-key favorite archetypes in the game. They play a very control-y style centric around one singular field spell, which sounds really bad, but it's also a deck that doesn't really need its normal summons. You can combine it with a ton of good normal summon engines, and I think there's a lot of room for this deck to actually be something really strong in the future. But I don't think it's there yet. I think it's one or two cards away. So today we're going to be talking about what one card would look like. If I could give this deck one card to try and make it as better as I can with just one card, what I would want to do. And without making it overly busted insane, because obviously we could just make an insanely ridiculous card that would never get printed. I'm trying to keep it somewhat realistic here. So where I want to start is going over what the archetype has, right? This is a control strategy based off of using their field spell. That is Generator Boss Stage. This card is insane. If any card is added from the main deck to your opponent's hand, including in the draw phase, so it counts the draw phase, you can special summon any Generator straight from the deck. Amazing. Also, when a Generator monster is special summoned to your field, during your opponent's turn, you can fill the rest of your main monster zones with Fairy Light level 4 15/15 tokens, which is really good. They are destroyed on the end phase, but you use them as fodder to get disruptions with your Generator monster. So very good. The field spell is the most important card in the deck. Then you have a ton of monsters. This guy's insane. He's actually one of the best. He's probably the second best card in the support. He's the only normal summon in the deck, but he can quick effect tribute himself to summon a Generator from deck, which is really good. Your opponent's turn or your turn. He also gives a 1000 attack buff during your opponent's turn to all Generator monsters, including the tokens, because they are Generator tokens. Keep that in mind. Very good. Then you have a bunch of boss monsters. Har is amazing. He is an Omni Negate by tributing 2 Generator monsters. Or also, if your opponent adds a card from the deck to the hand while he's face up, except for the draw phase, you can just make your opponent send a monster from hand or field to grave. So they get to choose, but they do still lose a card from hand or field, which, can be, nice to just run them out of resources. Utgard is really good. This is the second best disruption. Quick effect, tribute 2 Generators to target a card and banish it. Pretty good. Banishing's good. Needhog is an interesting one. The reason I think Needhog's decent is because you only have to tribute one Generator monster to use it. It negates a special summon, which is pretty good. So just negate any inherent summon, which definitely comes up. Next up is Frody. This one's definitely not as good because the problem is he can tribute any number of Generators to pop that many monsters on the field, but your opponent draws cards equal to the number of monsters destroyed. So you're going to pop a bunch of stuff, but they are going to draw a ton of resources, to recover from that. So I don't love this card, but it's there. Mardell, when she's summoned, she searches you for a Generator card or a plant. Yeah. Great. I mean, you play one of her because you just want to have her to use Lopter to go into, or if you want to summon her off of the boss stage, she's there for that as well, but still nice to have. Hela is great for recursion. She can tribute a Generator to summon a Generator back from grave. So tribute a token to get a full-on boss monster back from grave. It's actually pretty good. 2800 defense. She's a wall. Great. Develgus is there because a lot of times most builds are going to be playing a ton of one-ofs. So if you draw one of your one-ofs, but you still really want access to that specific one, Develgus just tributes a Generator from field to summon from hand. So it gets specific one-ofs out of the hand, which is nice. And then you have Naglfar. He is protection. He says if a Generator monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can tribute a Generator monster instead, which is pretty good, to be honest. Or I'm sorry, you destroy another Generator monster instead. So it's just a replacement effect. He's also the biggest one at 3100, which is a pretty nice threshold to hit. But yeah, he can actually be pretty nice to allow you to play, to not lose to certain board wipes or removals, as well as the fact that you don't lose your tokens on your opponent's turn. You can protect them with this card, I believe, which is pretty cool. Then for the other spells, this card's really interesting. You reveal a Generator monster in hand, and if you do, add 2 Generator spell and traps from deck to hand, and then you place the revealed monster on the bottom of the deck. So you're going to brick on some of these level 9s. This card kind of helps you trade them in for something a little more useful in the hand, which is pretty nice. I don't hate this card. Also don't love it. Next up, we have Generator Boss Loot. This card's garbage. Not even going to talk about it. Generator Boss Fight. This card is essentially, what's that card called? Metaverse, right? Metaverse? Yeah, I think it's Metaverse. The trap card that just activates a field spell from deck. This activates your boss stage straight from deck, then makes your opponent draw a card. And the reason that's good is because you wouldn't be able to use this going first to make it in time before your opponent's draw phase. So you'd be able to activate the boss stage and then force your opponent to draw, which would then make the boss stage activatable immediately. So that's actually pretty decent. It's not great because your opponent still gets a +1 out of it, but the boss stage is the most important card in the deck. So consistency wise, it is helpful. Next up, we have Boss Room. This card's not great, but it's not the worst. It's continuous. If your opponent activates any card in response to a Generator card effect, you can discard a card to make your opponent's effect turn into. Each player draws one card. Again, not amazing. Your opponent still gets a replacement for their resource. If it said you draw one card, I'd actually be a little more about this. But again, it has to be a card specifically responding to a Generator activation. So this card needs a bunch of other cards around it to kind of make it work. But And the last card here is Generator Boss Fight. I'm also going to X that out. Oh, I'm sorry, last main deck card. And then, of course, you have the Boss Monster. This guy doesn't do a ton. He's not the worst thing in the world. Takes 2 level 9s. He gains 1,000 attack for times his materials. And he has a quick effect where you can attach a material to make each player draw one card. Then each player that drew a card attaches one card from their hand or field to this card. So this card would gain a material out of it. So you'd start at 2,000, but then would immediately become 3,000. And then on your opponent's turn, 4,000, and then all this stuff. You are forcing them through their deck potentially, which can be decent. But at the same time, you're kind of letting them construct their own hand, which is really bad, right? You're letting them draw one and then like give you their like worst monster in hand. And so you're just kind of making their hand better, which I don't love. So he's fine, but I don't think he's great. I don't think he really does much, to be honest. So where do we end up here? Pretty much, I think the field spell is fucking ridiculous. You have some very, very strong boss monsters. I mean, just Har himself is the equivalent of an Omni Negate and forcing your opponent to send a monster from hand or field. That's really strong value off of just one boss stage, especially considering boss stage can get you Lopter, then Lopter can get you Har, and that way even if you like all you have is like Har as like disruption wise, you'll still have Lopter on field to be able to potentially trigger next turn, come back to your turn, or you could save them all the way until your opponent's next turn to trigger the stage again, depending on the situation. Just depends on where you're at. But the deck has so many cool boss monsters. I think the monsters are actually great. You've got 3 legitimately good like disruptions, right? Omni Negate, Quick Banish, the ability to negate a summon, but it takes a little bit less resources. Only have to tribute 1 generator, which means if you're in a situation where you can't keep the tokens, you can just summon Needhog and he himself still gets you the disruption, whereas these guys need you to have a second generator, which can be awkward sometimes. So I like Needhog for that reason. So 3 legitimate disruptions. You've got a Searcher in Mardell, which makes Lopter a Searcher turn 1 if you want. You have Hela for recursion, Develgus to help you unbrick on the monsters, and you also have stuff like Boss Quest, which also helps you unbrick on them. You will brick. That's probably the biggest downside of this entire deck, is that you're just going to draw some of these level 9s. It's going to be super awkward. So where do we go from here? 100%, the monsters are great. I think the monsters are perfectly fine. You need nothing helpful there. So you look at spells and traps. And I think the biggest thing for me is Boss Quest, right? I think this card a lot of times doesn't even see play in these decks. If it does, as a one of, and here's the problem. You're going to search 2 generator spells and traps, but what can you search, right? Like, obviously boss stage is the first target if you don't have it. If you have it, what do you search? Boss room plus a boss fight? I mean, this is a redundant copy of a field spell that also gives your opponent a draw, so that's not really that useful. I mean, it's nice to have a backup copy of the field spell because versus this deck, everybody's strategy is going to be to remove the field spell, so that is nice, so that's fine. But this card is poop, man. Like, I don't want to play this card, and I don't want to feel obligated to play this card just because I have a card like Boss Quest in the deck. So I would love it if Konami could give this deck some kind of trap. I think a trap is the way to go. It's already control strategy, slower kind of strategy. You set up the field spell, you continually try to summon monsters on your opponent's turn and grind them out that way. And so I think you just need a better target, like 1 or 2 better targets. If we're just talking about one card, I would love to see a trap card that gives you either disruption or extendability. Maybe it summons a generator from deck, right? So that you have the potential of getting to Ugarda plus Har in one turn off of like the field spell combined with like whatever this trap card would be. That would also add value to things that like already search you normal traps. The deck already has a normal trap that gets you to the field spell, so that adds value to something like Trap Trick, maybe a Lair of Darkness Engine, not really a Lair of Darkness Engine, more so Lilith. You could just play Lilith and she gets you a trap from deck. That gives you whatever utility trap you're looking for at that instance. And like I said at the beginning of the video, don't forget, this archetype does not really use its normal summon. Yes, you have Lopter, but you can summon Lopter off the field spell, so you're not that hard pressed on like starting off with Lopter. And so yeah, like you can combine anything. You can play Invoked with this, Dogmatica with this. I've seen some people I think try Zodiac with this. Just any deck that just is just like, we're pretty consistent, don't really need a huge engine, normal summon, get you good value. Pretty good. We've even seen combo variants with this, playing like Gears of the Orcus Mech Knight, doing like crazy combos, and if it doesn't resolve, you just activate the field spell and grind it out in a control setting. Totally works. So yeah, I think you need a trap. I just think like, at least for like more pure variants, not even more pure like variants, but if you want this deck to be able to play more so just with its own engine, I think Boss Quest needs to be more valuable. Yes, it does require you to have a generator monster in hand, but that's not the hardest thing in the world. If you even have just the field spell gets you Lopter, Lopter gets you Mardell, Mardell can get you a search, boom. That gets you the monster that makes this card live. Shuffle it back in, search 2 more, great. I just think the traps are actually the way to go. I think they're actually pretty good. It also gave you another searchable target for Mardell as well, which you have super easy access to via Lopter. And yeah, I don't know. I just think a disruptive trap is the way to go. I don't even care what the disruption is. It just needs to be something decent. I don't care if it's a targeting pop, destroy 1. Do not care. I don't care if it is... I don't care what it is, as long as it's a respectable disruption and it doesn't require too much cost and it's like a worthwhile kind of disruption. Just maybe a quick removal, and a gate would be great as well, but not necessary. So yeah, that's what I think the best card for the archetype is when you really look at like everything the archetype has right now. Monsters are good, field spells great, but all the other cards are like kind of meh. So I really would like to see some versatility there. If you get multiple cards, maybe a spell and a trap, just be good at anything. One could be removal, one could be disruption, and then boom, they're one-ofs, and then you just have so much more accessibility with Boss Quest to get to the rest of your engine. And I think that is invaluable for where this deck is at the moment. So that's going to do it for here today, guys. Thank you so much for watching as always. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think about generators? Like, again, keep in the mind that this is like a reasonable 1 card that this archetype would get. What do you think makes the most sense for them? What would you like for it to do? And obviously keep it somewhat realistic, right? Like, like obviously we could make the most busted card ever, but that wouldn't really, it kind of defeats the purpose of even thinking about it, because any deck could just get the most busted card and it'd be crazy. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts here, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.